I say to the people that donated, in fact, I'm saying to myself as the biggest donator, thank you for supporting People's Voice. And when we went on air on November the 25th, 2013, we were fulfilling virtually everything that we said we would within months of saying it. It was an extraordinary achievement. But once the vitriol and the campaign of abuse and attempts to destroy it started, it was in a death spiral, which, barring some person coming in and saying, I'll sponsor this, sponsor that, was going to end like it's ended. But, you know when people are putting the greater good first. Because no matter what happens, no matter how they get kicked down, they get up and carry on. No matter how they don't like something that's happened, they get up and get on. When you are not putting the greater good first, but you're just claiming that, well, using the alleged greater good to benefit you, what happens then is when something happens you don't like, you want to destroy the subject of that, even though it's doing great work for the greater good in terms of communicating suppressed information. And again, I've seen that at the People's Voice, where people, oh yeah, we got to do this, it's great. I mean, on the 2 days before Sonia Poulton unleashed this campaign of vitriol against me, she was on air going, oh, David Icke, he's wonderful, that's on any programs. But when the greater good is your prop, not your prime focus, then you don't say, okay, it didn't work out, I didn't like what happened, but hey, they're putting out information 24 hours a day, all the best. You don't do that, you want to destroy it. But when the greater good is your focus and something disappointing happens, like what's happened to the People's Voice. Now, if they will do that, then they will create terrorist attacks using mindless people who have no clue who their real masters are, or who is really in control of their mind. And I'll get to that before I finish. They will do that because if they want to change society in a way that the public would massively resist if it was just openly offered, then they have to create circumstances which change that public perception, so that resistance to how they want to push the world on to this global Orwellian fascist dictatorship state will be reduced. That resistance will be reduced to make it easier for them to bring about what they want. And that the public en masse would resist if they knew what was actually behind all this. And then there's another part of this, which is, if there's a few of you, and as I've been pointing out all these years, the number of people in full knowledge of where this world is being taken and why, and who's actually behind it, is tiny compared with the target population. Tiny. And because of compartmentalization, the will of that few plays out through the system, different levels, with the vast majority of people who are working to play it out without any idea of what they're actually playing out or why, because they only know their little bit in the compartmentalized structure. They don't know how their bit connects to everyone else's bit to create a picture which can be clearly seen in terms of where this world is being taken. And all you have to do is look at the scale of surveillance, the scale of the disappearing privacy, to see that this is not about protecting us from terrorists. This is about creating this Orwellian global state that I've been writing about for so long, and others like Orwell and Huxley in Brave New World were also writing about with extreme accuracy, as it turns out. So this other side of this increasing rapidly increasing number of terrorist attacks and shootings, etc., is because that tiny few have to manipulate a vast target population. And if that target population has unity and has harmony amongst itself, that's very, very much more difficult to do than if you play different factions of your target population off against each other. And when you kind of put the dots together, well, first of all, in the United States, with these shootings and attacks on policemen and police officers, and the way that police officers have treated black people, or white people too, by the way, but black people many, many times. And of course, that's come to the fore in the last few weeks. It's clear what's being done. The American society is being divided systematically. They want a race war. It's blatantly obvious. And if you can have a race war, a war in effect between one race and police, and one race and another race, or whatever, then you have the perfect situation for the few controlling the many, because you have the target population fighting each other. And that allows you to justify things that otherwise could not be justified, like more and more control, more and more surveillance, more and more Big Brother Orwellian state to meet the problem of the race war and the inter-community conflict. And then you move to Europe, and you see the obvious. Look at Chancellor Merkel and what she did in Germany. The obvious decision to allow vast numbers of migrants to come into Europe in enormous numbers, not to protect them from war and conflict like those coming out of Syria. I mean, hallelujah to that. The West has created these conflicts on purpose, the same network that's behind what I'm talking about now. And so, of course, we should look after the refugees of these conflicts that this Western cabal has created. Of course. But that's not what happened. Vast numbers of others were allowed in at the same time who weren't fleeing from such things. And it was calculated. This is why German people were just shocked that Merkel could open the doors and say everybody in. Because what they want is, and there's many levels to why this has happened. And it all leads to the agenda I'm talking about. But one level of it is they want to create a situation of inter-race, inter-culture wars in Europe. And when you've got the head of the French police before Nice saying that France is on the brink of civil war, well, you can see how they're moving it on. And if people want to see where this is meant to lead in terms of the scale of imposition by the state upon basic freedoms and what is called democracy and free speech, then they should look at what is happening now in Turkey. Because this, quote, coup in Turkey, on the face of it, there was an attempt to remove the regime of the president, Erdogan. And that may well be true, but there's another way of questioning this too. And that's the incredible speed in which the Erdogan regime responded to it, clearly knowing it was all coming, and how they have since set about arresting thousands of judges and academics and teachers and others who were not supporters, basically, of the Erdogan regime. And how on earth can you justify arresting that number of people so soon after this, quote, military coup attempt? Where does the evidence come from in that short time to justify this massive number of arrests of people in the country? It doesn't. It was all pre-planned quite blatantly. As a result of this vacuous, vicious, insane man, Erdogan, who serves the interests of the West, not least by supporting ISIS in Syria, he's been given the opportunity, problem, reaction, solution, to purge all the people he thinks are against him. Because Turkey's no longer a democracy. It's a tyranny. It's a dictatorship. And it's being justified by Erdogan on finding a solution to the problem of the coup attempt. And in all these events, this is the reason why, if you read the alternative media as it dissects these official narratives of these terrorist attacks and shootings, why so many questions immediately start to arise. Why the official narrative has so often holes in it all over the place and contradictions in it all over the place. And why you see these patterns of repeating behavior, repeating patterns of action from one to the other. And when you see them all and you see the recurring patterns, it's quite clearly that these attacks, most of them anyway, are being played out to a blueprint, a repeating blueprint.